is BBC News. I'm Kathy Kay on a historic day here in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Matthew. I'm really Waller here in London.
A new era in American politics as Joe Biden prepares to be sworn in as the 46th and the oldest president of the United States.
America back together after a turbulent 4 years.
To heal, you must remember. It's hard sometimes to remember. But that's how we heal. It's important to do that as a nation.
After 4 years, Donald Trump, who's refused to attend this inauguration, leaves the White House for the last time.
A short while ago, he made his final speech as president before flying off to his home in Florida.
The future of this country has never been better. I wish the new administration great luck and great success. I think they'll have great success. They have the foundation to do something really spectacular.
An historic day for America and the world.
We'll bring you every moment of it live here on BBC World News. Hello and welcome to BBC World News on a day which in the White House and the beginning of Joe Biden's administration.
Well, the change in Washington couldn't be greater at every level. Tone, personality, and policy. We're an hour away from Joe Biden taking the oath of office. It'll happen in the Capitol building amid incredibly tight security and with a greatly reduced number of people in attendance due to the pandemic. But as we await that climax,
This is the moment Donald Trump left the White House for the last time as president in this term of office, at least, strolling out onto the lawn accompanied by his wife Melania and then getting into the presidential helicopter Marine One. He flew to Andrews Air Force Base before getting on board Air Force One for the trip down to Florida to begin a new life as citizen Trump. He made one last speech as commander-in-chief. Here's a little of what he said.
This is a great, great country. It is my greatest honor and privilege to have. I will always fight for you. I will be watching, I will be listening, and I will better. I wish the new administration great luck and great success. I think they'll have great success. They have the foundation to do something really spectacular. So have a good life. We will see you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good life. In a rare moment, the First Lady, Melania Trump, also decided that she wanted to speak and she took the stage to bid her own farewell.
Being your First Lady was my greatest honor. Thank you for your love and your support. You will be in my thoughts and prayers. God bless you all. God bless your families. And God bless this beautiful nation. Thank you.
Very brief there from Melania Trump. As for Joe Biden, well, he left Blair House, the residence opposite the White House, where by tradition incoming presidents spend their last day before actually taking office. He drove in that huge motorcade to a church service, although he'll not have the keys to the White House formally in his pocket for another hour. He is already benefiting from some of the perks of office.
Yeah, Blair House, by the way, which has been the place that is the visiting house for dignitaries. They can stay there and was apparently instituted because Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor, got fed up of finding Churchill wandering around the rooms of the White House in the middle of the night wearing his dressing gown and smoking his cigar. And so she decided there had to be Blair House, which was the visitor's house, the guest house for the White House. So he spent the night there and he drove off there. You could see it in the motorcade to go to his church service. He was using one of the huge armored vehicles reserved for the president and was accompanied by a cavalcade of aides and security officers, also in attendance at the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle, just a few blocks from the White House, was the House leader, fellow Democrat, also a Catholic, Nancy Pelosi, and the outgoing Senate leader, Republican Mitch McConnell. Mr. Biden, that itself a gesture of unity, perhaps that we haven't seen in Washington for a while. Mr. Biden now is moving from the church. They finished the church service. We saw the pictures of them coming out, him and his family from the Church of St. Matthew, and they are making their way through Washington to the Capitol building, which is just behind me, and then they and the other dignitaries will be announced onto the inaugural platform with the Marine Corps band, which has been warming up and is starting to play music, and they'll all start filtering in. You'll see there, you can start to see people starting to arrive. Members of Congress will be there. Again, because of COVID, this is a much reduced turnout on that platform. They have to have some social distancing. There's the Marine Corps band in the foreground. They have been playing at every inauguration in American president since Jefferson, and they're playing again today. We are joined by
despite all of the security implications, despite the lack of crowds, it is still the most stunning of backdrops as we await the inauguration proper. Let's go to Gary O'Donoghue, our correspondent on the ground in Washington. And Gary, you're a little way away from that. All those flags behind you in place of the crowds. Well, exit Donald Trump, the stage now left clear for Joe Biden.
Yes, and he's got an awful lot to do, hasn't he? I mean, the next few hours, of course, will be dominated by the sort of pomp and circumstance and the ceremony of this sort of democratic process. But he will get to work straight away when he gets back to the White House mid-afternoon. And we know that there are going to be possibly 15 executive orders today, that he'll sign a couple of other measures as well. He means to hit the ground running and to undo a lot of those particularly egregious measures, in his view, that Donald Trump brought in, such as ducking out of the Paris climate change agreement, such as that ban on people entering the United States from certain Muslim countries, and of course rejoining things like the World Health Organization in this sort of pandemic era. So there will be an immediate transition, I think, from what we see at the Capitol today, albeit in its pared down state and its sort of securitized state, to the business of government a matter of a small number of hours later.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop, Gary, with today, of course, when he's going to sign, as you say, a dozen executive actions, much of it designed to undo what President Trump has done, which is kind of pretty much what President Trump did on coming into office. Not unusual for presidents to come into office and sign executive orders on their first day to try and put their mark on things. But we've got a very busy first 100 days that President Biden has been laying out on COVID, on the economy, on immigration, on environment, on national security, on civil rights. This is a president who is going to be big and bold right at the beginning of his presidency, and he can do it because that building that we are looking at, the Capitol building, is in Democratic hands. Only just, but it is in Democratic hands.
Yeah, and that really does transform what's possible, doesn't it? I mean, you think about not just things like his nominations for cabinet, which will have to go through the Senate, where it's 50-50 now with a casting vote for the vice president, but also things like this huge COVID relief package that he's wanting to get through, $1.9 trillion, much of it directed towards pandemic relief, $1,400 for Americans earning under $75,000 a year, a whole range of help for the individual states as well. And he's going to need a lot of that sort of goodwill and a lot of that muscle, democratic muscle in Congress to get that done. But we know that his sort of history is one of trying to reach across the aisle. So I think you're going to see attempts, at any rate, by the Biden administration to try and take some Republican support along with him. And that's why I think you've seen Janet Yellen yesterday with her Senate confirmation hearing. She may well get confirmed in the next couple of days, because that kind of work to get the COVID relief bill through she'll be central to all that, and she'll want to get started on that straight away.
Yes, exactly on that point, Gary. We know that Mitch McConnell has had conversations with Joe Biden in the same way that Mitch McConnell hasn't spoken in person with the president since mid-December, so it gives you a sense of exactly what you were saying. You're there in terms of Inauguration Day. I mean, despite political divisions, it is always a day of tremendous excitement. Give me an idea of what it's like there today. Is it less excitement and more an element of nervousness?
Well, look, I think since the election that the atmosphere in this country has been one of nervousness and anxiety. That was heightened, of course, by what happened here at the Capitol 2 weeks ago. Everyone has been, in a very simplistic sense, waiting for something else to happen. And I think there will be a huge amount of relief that we have got to this point in the day, God willing, and things are going okay so far. And that is what I think a lot of Americans will feel, that they want to see today go off properly, this peaceful transfer of power that America prides itself on and is a sort of cornerstone of American democracy, that hasn't been so far disrupted in any serious way, despite what we saw 2 weeks ago. So that is, I think, the overriding sense. But of course, you would expect to see hundreds of thousands of people here having, something of a party, wouldn't you, on the National Mall? Even in these January temperatures, people turn out for these events. And they're not here today. And they're not here not just because of the security situation, but because of the pandemic situation, of course. And whatever you think about the virtual world, even being able to watch parades and watch shows and a few pop stars in that sense on TV or through your computer screen doesn't really replace what this day is normally like and should be like.
No, we are seeing now some of the motorcades with the dignitaries arriving who came from church. That looks like Mitch McConnell, perhaps, from the background. They went to church with, yes, that is Mitch McConnell, because there's his wife, Elaine Chao, who was a cabinet member under President Trump, but resigned after the Capitol Hill riot, saying that had been a breaking point for her. So Mitch McConnell is there now in the Capitol building, the Senate Majority Leader, about to become, of course, the Senate Minority Leader, because Chuck Schumer will take over, the Democrat will take over as Senate Majority Leader. But it was a departure from the last 4 years, the fact that we had these members from the Republican Party joining Donald Trump. Now that's also there. You've got Chuck Schumer, who's going to become the Senate Majority Leader, Amy Klobuchar, who was also one of the people who ran for president in the yellow coat there. Kevin McCarthy there, I think, is it's very hard, perhaps with the masks on, it's a bit harder to tell who these people are, but these are the people, the dignitaries on Capitol Hill, who have been with President-elect Biden at church and are now going to the building, the Capitol building. What else won't be happening, Gary? What else are we missing? Let's quickly run through that makes this another exceptional inauguration day. Because we didn't have the ride from the White House to the Capitol with the two presidents together because Donald Trump's not here. There's not going to be the inaugural lunch, which is traditional as well. There's a bunch of things we're not having, aren't there?
Yeah. That's right. I mean, the lunch is a big one. That is sort of, where Congress, in a sense, welcomes the new president in. The parade, the huge parade we normally get after the inauguration itself, we won't get that. And of course, those famed inaugural balls, dozens of them that usually take place later on in the day, into the evening, where the president sort of tours the various balls, some of them sponsored by individual states, some of them sponsored by organizations, non-profits. Does the president go to this one? Does he go to that one? Which one does he skip? All those sorts of things, which we'll normally expect to read stories about, we won't get that either. So it is a hugely pared down event. But the essence of it, I guess, is still here, isn't it? The simple essence of coming to the Capitol, of standing there on the balcony, and as a Chief Justice administering the oath of office, the key elements are still there, even if some of the surrounding circumstance and pomp isn't there.
Harry, thanks very much for the latest there from Washington. We'll be back to you in the next little while. I'm also going to, at this stage, say goodbye to Kathy Cage. She's going to just briefly head away before we go to the BBC News special that will take us through all of the inauguration. Kathy will be back to take us through the next vital few hours. For now, Kathy, thanks very much, and good luck with all of that. But let's continue to look at the live pictures that are coming to us from the capital in these final hours before the ceremony, because all those arrivals continuing there, and of course very limited numbers there on Capitol Hill. And we saw there where Gary O'Donoghue, normally huge amounts of crowds gathering there, they are not there, both because of the security situation and because of the pandemic, and all those flags there in their place. It's been made to look incredibly beautiful in the run-up to the Capitol, but it is a very, very different inauguration. Only a couple of hours ago we saw the sitting president depart, head for Florida. A final few words from him, and it was interesting because it was rather muted. Gary O'Donoghue, when we were talking earlier, making the point, and he was absolutely right, muted in terms of what the president had to say, steered really well clear of any sort of talk about the election that has happened and the result, sticking very much to the rather bland statements about the 4 years it's been, and then, as you would expect, listing what he thought the achievements were. So that was the president. As he departed, we continue to see more and more people actually take their seats, all huddled up. It is a classically chilly day there in the middle of January in Washington, but of course they all have to take their places relatively early ahead of what is about to take place, and of course the band playing, rehearsing, and going through. I just want to take you through some of the main locations to keep an eye on as we watch things unfold for this ceremony, because the swearing in takes place on the west front of the US Capitol, overlooking the Mall. It'll be a socially distant ceremony, after which the new president will make his inaugural address. President Biden and Vice President Harris will move to the east front of the Capitol for a pass-in review. This is where the new president reviews the readiness of the military. It is meant to represent the peaceful transfer of power to a new commander-in-chief. The new president and vice president will then leave the Capitol and travel to Arlington National Cemetery, along with the former presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton, all of them there, and they will lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. From there, it is back to central Washington, where President Biden will be given a presidential escort to the White House, and this group would normally be packed with spectators. This year stay away and watch all the proceedings. Well, I'm joined now by Chris Wilson, the filmmaker in New York. Chris, welcome to the program on this inauguration day. In terms of your headline thoughts, take us through it.
Well, you know, I think that Trump's legacy is what I'm thinking about right now, and it will really be two things, and I think two things only. Number one, the bungling of a once-in-a-century health crisis that is well on its way to costing 500,000 American lives. And number two, I think it was Donald Trump's incitement of an angry mob that attacked the U.S. Capitol and very nearly torpedoed the certification of a free and fair election. A lot of Trump's enablers and minions will try to spin this other ways, but I think that, forget about tax cuts or the placement of judges on the Supreme Court or in other courts. The story of this presidency is really those two things, the pandemic and the insurrection.
I'll take them in turn if I would, and it's interesting your reflections there, directly contrasting what we heard from the president on the tarmac only, an hour or so ago. But I was reading out a quote from Dan Rather, the broadcaster, a short while ago, who concluded that as bad as the Trump administration looks today, history will judge it much more harshly. It sounds as if you're very much in tune with that.
Absolutely. You know, it's hard to overstate the enormity of the relief that most Americans feel right now as they watch Donald Trump's Air Force One, his last flight away from the Capitol. You know, I'm old enough to remember, like Dan Rather, I'm old enough to remember Nixon and Watergate. I was a college intern at the time. And Gerald Ford famously said, our long national nightmare is over. Well, the Nixon era felt like a nanosecond next to the Trump era. And the reason is that it was an assault, not only on democratic institutions and constitutional norms, but it was an assault on our senses, a 24/7 parade of bullying and narcissism. And I think that when that plane took off with Donald Trump on it for the last time, you could feel America's blood pressure collectively lowering.
It's interesting what you said about Nixon, because with that transition, at least there was a clean break. With this, we've got another impeachment. We don't know exactly when that kicks off. And of course, that whole issue still to be resolved, which is so much of the Republican leadership were in lockstep with this president. And there's a real open question still about moving forward, whether you can do that with the very same leaders that were saying so many of the same things that Donald Trump said.
I think it's true. We don't know how this will play out. We don't know the end of the story. I mean, certainly Donald Trump richly deserves to be convicted in the Senate and prevented from ever running for office again. But I do think that departure today will live in history. You know, his handling of the pandemic and the attempted insurrection will live in infamy. And, you know, there's been a lot of pearl clutching and hand wringing about Trump not being at the inauguration, but who would really want this any other way? This is a president who never showed up to govern in the first place, a president who blew up his own transition in 2017 and blew up Joe Biden's transition. So why would we want him at the inaugural? Frankly, I think it's going to be easier for Joe Biden as well to try to unify the country without having a president, an ex-president glowering from the bleachers. So I think it's a good thing.
Just a final quick thought. You talked about the bungling of the health crisis. Why do you think it was bungled? Was it simply a denial of what was happening because he was so focused on the economy for his re-election, or was it partly because he surrounded himself with cronies, with appointments who were not experts?
He surrounded himself with fantasists who told him untruths, and he eagerly latched onto them. You know, I can remember having heard from the White House chiefs of staff about a solemn occasion, and the night before Inauguration Day, every president is walked through the nuclear codes, how to activate the so-called football. Every chief of staff can tell you in chilling detail what that is like. What a relief that is now in Joe Biden's hands, or will be at noon. And yet, you know, the irony is that a lot of us worried about Trump with the nuclear codes. It turned out what we really had to worry about was the empty chair. The fact that no one was at home when a once-in-a-century health crisis struck this country, and the result is we have almost 500,000 Americans dead. That's really a failure on Donald Trump, and it'll be his legacy.
Okay. Chris, we're going to leave it there, and thank you. And we've just showing the pictures, the presidential motorcade just making their way around slowly to Capitol Hill. We were seeing a little early Bernie Sanders taking a seat. We were seeing Mitch McConnell there. So many of the guests are there as the president-elect heads to Capitol Hill ahead of inauguration. Larry Madowo is there on the streets of Washington. And Larry, as you were taking us through a little earlier, just the most huge security operation currently in place in Washington.
Absolutely. It's a massive security operation with the 25,000 or so National Guardsmen, armed soldiers in the streets of the Capitol, and also every law enforcement agency you can think of. The U.S. Customs and Border Patrol are behind me. There's the U.S. Secret Service, which is in charge of this entire operation, because the 59th inauguration has been designated as a national special security event. And we've also got military, the FBI police, for instance, transit police, all sorts of other law enforcement agencies all coming together to secure this operation. But just about 10 or 15 minutes ago, the motorcade, we believe, of Vice President Mike Pence just drove right past as he was sitting right there, sort of appeared to be waving as he went past We're about a mile away from the east end of the Capitol, so we believe he's also heading to the Capitol. He will be introduced shortly before the president-elect essentially is there. And he is the last person of the administration who is available to essentially hand over power to Joe Biden. And he saw this all security operation behind me with the armed men and women guarding and trying to make sure that if there are any armed protesters coming into the city, that they're so far out from the Capitol that they can't get there and disrupt what's about to happen.
Larry, thanks very much. Extraordinary to see those pictures, because instead of the motorcade going past throngs of Americans going past, just you saw them lines deep of National Guard called there to secure the Capitol, to protect the president from other Americans. I suppose that is the bottom line, that is what we've been watching. That is the backdrop, a beautiful shot there of the Capitol. Let's speak as we edge towards the end of this part of our program, back with Ron Christie, who's there in Washington, and Amanda Renteria, who worked on Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. And let's start with her, because your thoughts on this moment as we edge towards seeing Joe Biden become the new president of the United States.
You know, this is a moment for America, for everyone that has been working really hard over the last 4 years, or have been waiting for leadership, have been waiting for empathy and experience to come to the administration, to come back into leadership in this country. As we all watch, there's an energy, there's an excitement, there's a moving forward again for so many folks who have been waiting for today, who have been waiting to send off Trump and to start anew in America.
I'll come on to whether they can turn the page, but Ron, we were talking earlier, and Kathy was making the point about looking at that election campaign and the amount of people that voted for Donald Trump. In the end, the Democrats picked right, didn't they, in terms of Joe Biden? He was perhaps the only person to bring together a coalition big enough to beat the sitting president.
Good day once again, Matthew. Yes, I think that's right. And we reflect and realize that Donald Trump received nearly 74 million votes, which is a historic level here in the United States. But yet and still, Joe Biden was still able to beat him by more than 6 million votes. Why? Because I think Americans wanted to turn the page. They gave the upstart the opportunity to come in, the non-politician, and at the end of it, I think many Americans said, you know what, we want to return to stability, we want to return to normalcy. Hence, we see the swearing in of the 46th president of the United States in the form of Joe Biden.
And we're seeing pictures of Joe Biden and Jill and the vice president and her husband as they edge towards those Capitol steps. We're about a minute or so away from the end of the program. So a final thought from both of you. Amanda first, about how easy or difficult it is to turn the page. The president-elect absolutely clear the task is to bring America together again. Is that a possibility in the near future, or is it a generational thing?
It's gonna be a journey, one step at a time. And I think what you saw today was a realistic view of, it starts with everyone coming together in church this morning as a very first step, something we haven't seen in a long time, that kind of bipartisan coming together. But I think everyone's well aware that this is a journey that we're going to have to take together, and it's one step at a time, and today it begins.
Ron Christie, a final word.
I think with the divided government in the United States Senate being as divided as it is, the House being as divided as it is, it's going to be up to Joe Biden to see whether he can bring the political leadership together to give the American people the leadership that they have been so craving for so many years. But at least today is a brand new start.
Well, thanks to both of you. We're edging to the end of the program here before we join a BBC News special, and they're absolutely the centre of your picture. The new team, the new president and the new vice president, and as they climb the steps, we are edging our way to the inauguration of a new American president. 46th president, after such turmoil over the last few weeks and months. A beautiful Washington morning as we head towards inauguration. Kathy Kay is here to take you through the next coming hours with a BBC News special. Thanks for watching so far.
Hello and welcome to a BBC News special live from Washington, where in just over an hour's time, Joe Biden will become the 46th President of the United States of America. This is the scene live as the President-elect and Vice President-elect, along with their families, former presidents and other dignitaries, arrive at the Capitol, a transfer of power and an inauguration like no other. The US Capitol is under unprecedented security, with more than 25,000 National Guard forces joining police to enforce a cordon around this ceremony. Joe Biden and his wife Jill began the day attending Mass at a Catholic cathedral here in Washington. Last night, he remembered victims of the pandemic, and he spoke of
To heal, you must remember. It's hard sometimes to remember. That's how we heal. It's important to do that as a nation.